I am going to call the Village Finance Advisory and Enhancement Committee for September 1st to order. Roll call, please.
President Langfeld,
Here.
Trustee Thuzius,
Here.
Committee Member Hildebrand,
Here.
Committee Member Cutler,
Here.
Committee Member Hicks, Committee Member Henry.
Here.
All righty. Public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the Finance Advisory and Enhancement Committee. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. While the Finance Advisory Enhancement Committee encourages input from residents, it may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noticed on the agenda. I don't believe we have anybody on for public, so let's just go right to general business discussion and possible approval of the August 4th, 2021 Finance Advisory and Enhancement Committee minutes. Do I have a motion?
Wait, Jay, just Michael's on here. He's the public here.
Okay.
I don't know. I just you said nobody's on here from the public, and I just saw Michael.
No, I was asking Bobby if there was anybody. I don't know
I'm
how
sorry.
to see everybody.
Oh, yeah, Michael's on, but he didn't register, raise his hand or anything.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
All right. So do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
A motion approval of last meeting minutes.
Do I have a
Second.
Oh, thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. So moved. Number 2, property tax levy update. Basically, this is just the chart that I sent out that was requested from the board for more information on the tax levy report. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. So we'll go to number 3, transportation utility presentation. Do we have-
Bobby, can I take over the screen?
Yep,
Cool. Okay. Our PowerPoint or presentation would be a little prettier if my computer did not decide yesterday to want to be entirely rebooted. So I am still working on that process. So Kevin and I have been working on this. Of course. So obviously we're the transportation utility fee. It's one of the different fundings for roads that's an alternative. We've already talked about the wheel tax. We haven't talked about special assessments, and I don't know if that is something that is going to be discussed with our committee. And as you may know, we already use general revenue and borrowing. So thanks to Bobby, we know that about $315,000 a year comes from transportation aid from the state. These are general funds, so they could be used for anything other instead of just for transportation. They go to things like salt and supplies and labor. However, we've already also needed around between $10,000 and $50,000 annually to fix the streets. We have 17 miles of road, which seems like a lot. And according to Jerry, we can replace every road every 68 years. Unfortunately, they only live for 30 to 50 years. And considering the weather keeps changing radically, who knows if that even is valid. So for 2021, there's 50,000 for street maintenance and 100,000 already being budgeted for street replacement, which has to come from somewhere. Although we have a so-so rating according to Town and Country Engineering, a 6 out of 10 is not the greatest thing. So what is a transportation utility fee? First of all, it's not a tax because there are no one is exempt from it. The village board would set the rates. People who do not drive or have no vehicles could be asked to be exempt, and it would be charged to people like your sewer rates do. It is based off of what kind of usage you use in the village. So businesses that have all of their vehicles registered outside of Cross Plains would also be subject to the fee. So it is based off of property and not vehicles. There is a book, I'm sure it's the driest book ever, that will tell you based off of census type of property, what they recommend, what level of utility fee. There are also a few consultant firms that could help us figure out what we should charge. Now, as we know, we looked at the wheel tax previously, and unless we're going to ask people for $40 per vehicle or more, we're not going to reach the $150,000 we would need just for 2021. How we would do a
Can you go back?
utility.
Can you go
So-
back? Is the pros and cons, those are for the wheel tax. That's not,
Yes.
okay, never
Oh,
mind that.
wait, no, they're not. They're a little of both. One thing,
They're for the wheel tax.
yeah,
This slide got moved. I thought that this one should have been up one, but that's all right.
sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine then. Go ahead.
So the why of this, it uses a tax levy limits the ability to generate revenue for roads. One thing I looked up was that it's been over 16 years since taxes on gasoline have increased. Back then, $1 would now be $1.86 using today's inflation rates. So that is not going as far as possible. It would be, as I said, there are algorithms to figure out how much you use our roads. Since nonprofits would be required to pay, it would increase the amount of fees collected dramatically. I believe it was Wisconsin Rapids I read that increased the amount collected just based off of schools and churches by 19% to their budget. If you are worried about businesses, which Bobby put in one of the comments, the village board could offer discounts to businesses coming in to make it look more appealing. But then again, having better roads and possibly more parking is also appealing to a new business coming in. So there's that. The village board can set it up anytime they want, since there is currently no legislation limiting this. Many communities, as I said, will just add it to the water and sewer bill. It is created by passing an ordinance. And as Bobby pointed out, it does affect the amount of general revenue received from the state, but it's not one-to-one. So people with the math knowledge would have to balance that correctly. So the pros and cons for this. as I said, the nonprofits pay, which would be a lot more money coming in. It's more fair since it's based off of use, not vehicles. More flexible. You can, one of the things it recommends and is that you do a 10-year plan so you know where you're going to spend this money so you can plan accordingly so you're not ending up with a huge amount of money left over every year so that people feel that the money is being spent instead of just banked. It does consistent invoicing and it's no impact to your taxes. Some places are being grumpy about it. It can't be used for sidewalks, plowing, or street cleaning. And it's a little tricky to start, but it gets easier as we move on.
Can you go back to go?
Yeah,
Can you just
sorry.
go back again? I just didn't look at the cons.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, are the cons, are those something that is legally restricting this?
No, people sue.
Oh, okay,
And because it's something new, people don't like it.
gotcha. Okay,
But if you can balance it out with, you know, it is harder or it'll bring down your property taxes and it's more flexible. It could be sold, but you're going to have to teach
Right.
people.
can you go back? You say that we lose state funding. Is that from the transportation fund or just state revenue fund? And what is it? I thought I read in Bobby's that it also affects we have to peel down our tax levy restriction, or what I'm trying to, the word's not coming to my head right now.
So it
That
affects the transportation aid, and I think it doesn't currently affect the levy, but they could pass legislation so that would affect the levy, but it currently
Okay.
does not.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. All right. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, not at all.
Can we
So,
stop?
huh?
Can we stop it at any time? So there's
You can,
somewhere,
since it's an ordinance, yeah.
okay,
Just like ATVs or anything else, just the village board decides it.
right.
So the street programs are reallocated, which would end up being less on your property taxes. A lot of the nonprofits in
Just a
the
question.
Yep.
You have said that it's more users. So I see you have it on here, trip, you determine trips. How do you do that?
It is an algorithm that there are consultants that help with that. And
Okay.
it's based off of like residential type setting versus school versus typical business like gas station. As I said, there's a really thick and probably very dry book that goes along with the census numbers that you know, each business's type of business has its own category.
So but I thought originally on one of your slides, it was tied to the footage of roadway in the front
That
of
is
your
part
house.
of the math as well.
Okay.
It's a really high-end algorithm. What most communities do first with whoever they're working with on this is break up all the different properties in the area under those categories so that you know what types you have and so that you can create the fees accordingly. And since you would hopefully know how much money you're trying to collect, you can balance that all out.
Okay.
So yeah, it's some high level math,
Okay.
but it doesn't sound too daunting if you're working with the right people. If you watch that video we've mentioned before, that group is very familiar with working on this and have done it with many different Wisconsin communities.
So state statute doesn't dictate like it does
Nope.
on the wheel tax.
It is just an ordinance you create.
Hmm.
So it could be changed at any time with board approval, which is where you get the flexibility.
Right, right.
So Wisconsin Rapids does have it, as does Neenah. And Columbus is working on it. And these are good areas to read more on the topic. As we said before, that video that is from Rhinemecker, I believe it is. I am bad at names. Has a 45-minute video all about Tufts that is worth watching if you'd like to learn it all. Also, here it is, Rick Melky. There was a young man, I believe it was Clintonville, he wrote one of his thesis on it, and it goes into a lot of very specific details that is worth a read. It's rather long. I think it was like 50 pages, but it was not as boring as you could imagine. And it would be a great step-by-step process that the village could use if they decide to go further.
Do you know what the average, let's say $300,000 home, what the assessment would be on something like that? I know it's not tied to the price of the house. I'm just trying to get an idea of what kind of dollar.
It was significantly less. It was only like, I believe like $10 a month. Because you're also breaking it up over a year, which makes it hurt less for the average bill taking or bill paying.
Huh.
But yeah, they all do work it out with starting with what do we need in the next 10 years? And I think that's a good piece of information for the village no matter what, because things are going to just get more and more expensive, unfortunately.
No, I agree with you 100%. I was just trying to get kind of an idea of what we were talking about on a month.
I have numbers that I can throw into this that I think I got out of the Clintonville document. But yeah, it was much less than we pay in our property taxes.
Yeah.
Since it would be spread out more.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
So do we want, the question is what would you guys want the next steps to be? Would you want to talk to the consultants before we talk to the village board or what?
Well, this is just my personal opinion. I think I would hold off on presenting this to the village board until we get through the budget. It seems more complicated to try to get that in this next 2-3 months to actually use it. And since you can start it at any time, it would give us some time to do the projections of the 10 years. And then I think it would be helpful for the board to just do like some modeling. It doesn't have to be exact, but the different categories we can kind of guess at how many would fall into this without doing it, looking at the 17, just kind of see what it would be to get to, the 200,000, let's say, just to keep it a number, just as an example type thing. What would it look like? That's just my feeling.
Oh, no, that makes sense. I mean, I would have added in the, how much we would have needed to collect if I knew what we needed to collect. The report, the thesis also talks about for low income families, you could reduce the rate so that it is less of a burden upon them, which I think would be appreciated by some of the senior citizens who are on fixed incomes and may not even drive anymore.
Can we get that presentation and those links emailed to us or sent
Absolutely.
out?
As I said, I would have sent it, but last night my computer decided to be
Yeah.
unfriendly and did a blue screen of death.
I think it's needing a lot of selling to the public. And I think what you're saying, Jay, is a model, sounds like a good idea that we can show that it's not a bad thing, that it's a good thing. But yeah, I think you'll have a hard time telling people we're going to reduce your taxes because we're not in the tax levy for a road improvement. I don't know if you believe that.
Yeah, I would, that's kind of where I'm going with that. I guess I need more understanding of it. I think it's very interesting. But I would like to, and I'd like to see those links, and I haven't been able
Absolutely.
to view that. So I certainly need to get more educated on it. But I know there's a number of communities that have turned it down. Do you know why they did it? Was it just because of the political fallout? you
Yeah,
think?
that's
'Cause I
pretty
know
much
town
what
of-
it looks like, right?
Okay. Because I know town of Middleton had a big discussion on it and they voted it down. But I just didn't read the article that detailed besides knowing that they turned it down.
Yeah, I think just from a town standpoint, it maybe doesn't make quite as much sense unless they have a pretty good industry or business. And I guess town of Middleton has some, but I could see why a town would turn it down. I'm not I've been, helping out Deb and I'm not like overly trying to sell this because I don't think it's like some elixir, but I do think it has some things to look at. And two things that I think that we've talked about that I think we should be looking at are long-term planning. I think that's one thing. And I did talk to Jerry a bit and he gave me some numbers for the next 2 or 3 years because there are some big road projects coming up. And regardless, however we want to fund them, that's going to be important information to get. So I think that is going to take some months. And I agree with you, Jay, pushing this off until after budget would be great. And then the second part of that, I think we can work backwards from there. Once we have some of those numbers, we can work back from that. And that's where Deb was going. If we know that it's going to be 200 or 300 or 400,000 a year, whatever that is, if it's borrowed and taken through that process, what does it mean? And if it's or general revenue, or if it's through this utility process, what does that mean? And see if there's a real direct way to compare that. And for that process, we may need some help, I think.
Yeah, but what really I think makes this sellable, to be honest with you, the biggest key is everybody pays in. I mean, let's face it, we have schools and churches that do not pay in, and yet we spend a lot of money on roadways and traffic and clearing that they use. So that part is very interesting. I think it's much fairer system than just the residents of Cross Plains paying
Oh,
for it.
I agree with that as somebody who lives across the street from St. Francis, and you can listen to the buses being loaded for other communities at the end of the day. It
Yeah.
is because they put it on speaker outside the building for some reason. I just sent the presentation to Bobby so she can send it to everybody. And I would recommend the Wisconsin Rapids one for reading because theses are usually easier to read. And it's only 64 pages, which sounds like a lot, but it looks like it's in really big print.
Yeah. So is everybody cool? Maybe we set this, I guess we could set it in December, but I'm just worried about if we're gonna, meet with it the holidays and everything, or do we want to just move it to January? Thoughts?
As long as, the village board doesn't decide to do something like institute a wheel tax or anything in the meantime, sure.
I'm not sure that what is gonna happen, but I hear what you're saying on that. That's a good point, though. That's a really good point. Well, maybe what we do is just even push that off to look and try to get this all for in 2022, you know?
Well, Jay, why don't we, because I think there's some things we need to clean up in this presentation and add. And I think let us do some background research with Jerry and Bobby. And let's see if we can't get it to a point to present to the board, sort of like maybe by December or January,
Yeah,
instead of coming back here again.
Yep.
And if we have to come back here first, that's fine. But I think if we wait till January and then we say, okay, let's work on this, and then it's 2 or 3 months to collect the data.
oh no, I was hoping we work on it, bring it back to where it's ready to go.
Okay, all right.
And I think both, I guess what we can do, both this and the wheel tax are not tied to a budget cycle. You can put them in at any time. So I don't think that,
Yeah.
I don't think the timing of this has to be tied with the budget. It'd be nice, you know, within a perfect world, but I certainly think we can have these discussions outside of that and make decisions. And maybe
Does-
it'd be-
It's
Do we
tied to the
want that
discussion.
fourth
if you
option
don't
to
do
be
it.
looked at? The assessments, if we're gonna take the next few months, we might as well add in the special assessments as an option so that the board can see them all.
okay, I don't know what this special assessment is, which we're.
The special assessment is the one that uses road frontage mostly.
Oh, they're two different paths that you take? One's usage and one is frontage?
Yeah. The one that I don't know about frontage on the first one. I heard Deb say that. I don't remember reading that. It might be part of the algorithm, but I know that special assessment was mostly frontage, because they said if it's in front of your business, typically, or your house, that's really what you're paying for. So per resident, so sidewalk, everything, roadways, you name it. And so it was a portion of your size of your lot, essentially.
Is that different than the transportation utility?
Transportation utility was mainly about trips.
Oh. Okay, that was my confusion then. I thought you took either Plan A or Plan B, but they were both under the transportation. But so,
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, special assessment is done differently, but the utility and like Deb said, the algorithm they use may include frontage. I don't know. But I know that everything I read was about you're really getting the people that use the road more are the ones that are going to pay for it, and therefore number of trips. The example in one of those is restaurants and get X amount. Like, so a restaurant that seats 100 people is assessed different than a restaurant that seats 300 people. And one that's open all day is assessed more than one that's open part-time, so they're just a way to estimate number of trips. Churches, they mentioned churches a few times because they know how often they have trips.
right.
And size of their parking lots, because that's how many cars they can fit.
And then with businesses and schools, they also take into account to what's driving there, like major trucks and buses, which cause way more damage than the average car.
Okay.
What about delivery vehicles? Does a piece of delivery vehicle count as a?
For like PJs, yeah, that probably would be part of their fee, because they are using the roads more often.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear in my head. So the assessment model is not tied to the transportation utility. They're two
Correct.
separate statutes or something?
Totally
Or
separate.
methods.
Okay, well, see, that's what I'm wondering. Are they two different methods under the statute, or they're two different statutes?
They're totally different. The utility is the same statute that you could start a water utility. So
Okay.
this is being used. So the legal issues out there, and I don't want to pretend that I know a ton about this, but what I read was the legal issues out there for the transportation utility are that it hasn't been vetted. That there's some people that are saying, wait a second, this is an illegal taxation, and so it's not meant to be part of the statute. The League of Municipalities typically supports it, which is a good thing, because then I think people are less likely to challenge it. But it hasn't been tested yet. And so one of these legal challenges one day may blow up and the transportation utility is gone. I think that's the risk, because it
Okay.
hasn't been tested. Like, obviously sewer and water and whatever else those utilities been tried and true. But this exists in the same statute. Special assessment, we could do a special assessment already. We have the ordinances in place to do special assessments.
Okay,
So
okay.
we would just say, we're charging you X amount in your special assessment because you have this road frontage. Personally, I think was it the Wisconsin Rapids? I looked at that one too, I think, Deb, and they just like categorically went, no, like this is what it is and we're done. Like it's out.
Yeah,
Because it just
and
seemed like
lots of
everybody's
communities
gonna look at that. Say,
do that. Like Madison does it when they put in road or gutters and sidewalks. And if Bobby will let me take the screen one more time, please. There. So this is like how they look at the different units, the codes and the trips per unit. So every type of housing and business, they figure it how many trips per unit. And so at first everything would be put into these categories.
Okay,
And this is a part of the Clinton bill. And
Okay.
we don't have like a high cube warehouse, which is good.
right.
And hopefully we never will.
Soccer complex. Okay,
So like, if you look at assisted living, per trips per unit is much smaller because most of their people don't drive.
right. Okay. I see, understand. Okay,
Okay,
it's coming a little clearer to me.
yeah, it's a complicated system, but I think overall it turns out more fair because more people, the burden is shared better over the community.
Okay. So let me just try to wrap this up so we all kind of have an understanding. So Kevin and Deb are gonna take the comments from us, work on a little bit, and get something ready to go by January. And I guess I think Deb brings up a good point. I think we should look at the ordinance of special assessment, and that one should probably be a little bit easier to do. And probably put something like that, and then we can, when we present to the board, we can present like the wheel tax, special assessment, transportation utility. Does that make sense to everybody? So they're all together?
yes,
Yeah, especially if somebody can put together, just as a comparison, what we're doing now, which I assume would be pretty easy to do.
I can handle that.
well, I think we kind of summarized that, Deb, in that one slide and talking to Jerry. I think we have to pick something common to compare them to. So
Yeah,
there's two things. It's how much it costs, and then it's how quickly the roads get done. And we need to sort of set one of those two, probably how quickly the roads get done, something like once every 40 years, to pick some number, and then what that costs. And then we can sort of work backwards from there. So how are we going to get to that, 40 years divided by 40, and then, that'll give us a year. And then we can sort of compare everything that way. And we do have that example in there, the data we got from Jerry, which is, 67 years.
68 years
Yeah,
to do everything.
Yeah, so that's what we have at this moment in time, right? That only will continue to grow.
Maybe this is for a later discussion, but when you said it could be on your utility bill, so this year you have $100,000 in road construction for 2022. that money won't arrive to the village until everybody pays their fair share by the end of the year, right? So you can't do how do you financially swing it to say, I want to do, June's going to be the $100,000 road project, but yet we only have enough money for half of it. Do you have to borrow the other half, or is it special? How is that all?
I would think that what we would do until we build up, what you're gonna do, just like with everything else, is you're gonna try to get it started to build up that account. So yeah, at the beginning, it'll probably be, we'll calculate how much we bring in, we'll borrow, but then you'll have the rest of that year, in your example, to build up. So you'll get at least a year's worth by the next June. So yeah, the first year, it'll probably be a mix.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for them? Excellent job, guys. Really, really good job. All right. I think we have a plan, so I don't think we need to take any action on that. The next one is the discussion on the 2023 capital improvement plan items. And I gave this some thought, and we kind of had an example going over the 2022, which I think this committee could have been very helpful in ahead of time, because of course, when it gets to the board, we're limited in not only time, but the ability to do the research. So the one example I'm thinking about that we did this year in the capital was purchasing a full-size truck for parks and plow to go with it. They currently have a smaller truck, and they were looking to go to a bigger truck with a plow. And there was some good discussion on that, but I think if that would have been on the 2023, I think this group could have looked at what are the real needs and what are the best, or what are some good options to achieve those. Because there was some discussion on, do you need the plow? Do you need that big of a truck? Can't you use the truck that's already there? There was some good discussion and good questions. And I think it would have been helpful for something like that to have been vetted, a year before. And that one would have been tough because it wasn't on last year's. It just came up this year. But I think those are the things that we have to encourage staff to do, so we'd be able. So I don't know, Kevin, if you have any other thoughts on that, but I thought that was the one item that we had there that I thought this group probably could have had some, done some work on and benefited the board.
Yeah, I would agree with that, second that comment. And but otherwise, I thought the CIP proposal went actually relatively quickly with the board this year. So
Oh, yeah. It's not a criticism. I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
thinking of, we put this CIP review for this committee, but we really didn't define what the objective or the goals were for it. And we talked a little bit about it last meeting, but going through, that was one of the things I thought this committee could really do, and it would be very beneficial. So that's one thing I think we should be looking at when we look at these items. Are there items that, well, there might be options out there, and to research and vet the different options, and then to present them to even staff, to maybe even get them to go. So by the time it gets to board, we've already got the best option out there. Does that make sense to people? So what other things do you think, and I guess I'm gonna shoot it out to the other members. What else do you think we can do when we're looking at these items on the CIP? The SIP.
source, I guess we could play with the sources of funding for these two, so we might have a way to combine or to save pennies.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, where it says fund capital. I mean, I'm sorry, a proposed source, TID, fund balance, levy.
Okay.
So-
We see alternatives in funding.
Okay,
I always think it's a good idea to let the people know what we have. I mean, what we're paying for, and I brought this up before, what may be paid for already, so they have a better understanding with where the money and the capital goes. But, like the water and sewer and the well, I mean, I don't know if that, I know it's under the village because it's part of our village, but should there be a better way of breaking that down? Because it really doesn't affect their tax bill, it affects their water and sewer bill.
right.
So I think more information about what we purchased with capital, what's been paid for already, and they have an understanding of that. That we've borrowed in the past may be a better way for people to accept what we're doing with capital budgets. And I guess I don't know if we always need to have a big capital budget. That I think we need to maintain our village. I understand that, but do all the department heads think that every year is a capital budget item for something? Or should we be looking at getting our debt load down because we've given everything in the past? So I'm more concerned about getting our debt level down than I am maybe buying a pickup truck, and why it's a small amount of money, probably in the borrowing package, it all helps. So
Okay, so you're saying that it's not so much important that the individual items, it's more the concept of what's needed and educating people on what has been approved?
right, and what we have. So I see here, there's the replacement of the skid steer. Every 2 years, we're gonna, looks like we're on some sort of rotation for, and again, it's a small amount for 14,000, but is there a year warranty that we can extend that out? Because they say that's when the warranty's off, so.
Well, this is one that we could look in. This is what I have been told is the most financially sound. What we do is we buy a brand new one, right? I mean, it's a brand new one. And then what we do every 2 years, because it's under warranty, we trade that in for another one, another brand new one. And that's the difference in what we get for trade-in and what we get for the new one. And it's because of the warranty and the hours we put in. That's because a skid steer, that's got to be probably 200,000, 250,000 or more. I'm not really sure what a brand new one, but that's what I've been told is the system that we have been using, which they say is the most financially sound one. But that is clearly one that I have on my list that we should really look in, because is it better to buy a skid steer and keep it for 10 years, but then you're looking at a huge cost? I just don't know but that's what that particular item is, why it's only 14,000. You can't get a brand new skid steer for 14.
But we're borrowing it. Again, we're putting it into a package to borrow, as
yeah.
opposed to saying it's a line item and now we got to figure out how it fits in. If you're gonna do it every 2 years, if it's $7,000 a year, but when we borrow, that just adds to our total debt.
Okay, that's a whole different, I agree with you. We have to look at, and I've been a firm believer, and I've taken things off of capital and put them into operational because I think they need to be paid for, versus borrowing. So that's a different, I agree with you there that we could look at that, but on that particular one, I still think it needs more investigation on, is that really the sound way of doing it? I don't know. It could be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes sense in theory, right? Every 2 years you get a new machine and never worry about a maintenance cost. So.
Yeah, but I mean, those are the kind of things that I think we can vet to really see if that's a good option, and we should continue.
Okay. Do we typically take out a loan to buy those, or did we buy the last one outright?
No, it's every 2 years. We trade that in for a new one. And then we borrow the difference in the cost. Bobby, isn't that correct? That's how I remember, because this is like the second time I've seen it. We did it last year and I thought it was 12,000 last year.
I don't recall what we did in 2021, but on this sheet, it indicates that we're going to put it on the levy. The proposed source is the levy.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
Well,
I do think financially it might make more sense, based on lower O&M costs, but also that the value of a dollar right now is less or is, well, okay, let's think about that. The value of a dollar right now is actually more than it's going to be worth in 10 years. So I think that would take some thought to see if it makes the most sense to pay every 2 years or to kind of save up, you know,
Yeah,
and
I
do
mean,
it every
those are
10
the things
years.
we have to just figure it out. We're not gonna do it tonight, obviously. But, but, but those are the things on here that I think we can look at and just do some research to make sure it's the best way. And if there's another option, then that would be good too.
So are all
How
of the things
many
on
years
here,
ag-
oh,
sorry.
sorry.
I was just wondering, you keep saying we've done this in the past. How long in the past have we been doing basically replacing it every 2 years?
Well, I remember in the 20, obviously I got back on the board in 2019, so I would have been working on the 2020 budget. I know we purchased, this is for 2023. So this last year, I remember us doing this exact same thing. And I had been told that that is what we've been doing. How far back it goes, I couldn't tell you. I'm guessing, I don't know, Kevin, do you remember seeing it in
It's
how
been at
far
least-
back?
At least the last 2 budgets, probably the last 3. So
Yeah, so it goes back. There's been
21,
some,
19, I wasn't here in 17.
okay.
So on these sheets here, we don't know what's gonna be borrowed or what's being levied
Yeah,
or
it's-
whatever, correct? Is that, I'm assuming that?
They
It's in that
have
6th column.
what's recommended, but we don't generally talk about that until, and just to give you an example, we didn't do any borrowing in 2019, 0. And in 2020, I guess it was 2020, we didn't do any borrowing. And this year, we talked about it. Well, there's a good chance we're not going to do borrowing this year. So those, we haven't done any borrowing. So we try to work out the finances secondly, and then how we purchase that, we use discretion and figure out what's the best way.
I guess one of the things for me is, I listened to the last board meeting and I heard, lots of discussions about, what people thought we should have and all that, but I didn't feel like I heard like a number, like we've got this much money. This is what we can buy. And if you buy this, then we're not going to get this. It just seemed like we were voting on what do people feel like we need. And if we have to get into borrowing, that's where we go. Am I wrong there?
No, I think you're correct that but we didn't place a ceiling on it. That is true. There's pluses and minuses to
Yeah.
that. If you put a ceiling there, right, everybody's going to go to the ceiling. If you go on a needs basis, then it should be just on a needs. I've been through budgeting quite a bit, and actually being in the budget, running the budget for the Madison Police Department for a couple of years, I can tell you as a budgeter, if they said you can do capital up to 3 million, I did capital up to 3 million. If it was where you needed to justify everything, then I put in what I thought I could really justify and get through. So, I mean, that's something to think about. I have done that with the operating budget. We have set where we have given them, for example, this year, I said they could do a 1% increase on their base budget. Anything over that, they had to do a supplement. And we've done that 2 years, and I think it's worked pretty good. At least I think it has, because we were getting overloaded with a request for an extra $150 for postage. Do we really need to have a big discussion on, do we need to spend another $150? Well, this way it gives them the money to adjust their line items, and anything that's large, they need to justify it with the sub, and then we can deal with that. So I can tell you, we did a ceiling on the base budget.
I guess the thought process is there, if you're gonna eliminate debt, you gotta know where you're at to get underneath, to start reducing some of that and factor in, we should at least know where that borrowing ceiling is, at least whether or not we're gonna stay underneath it or not, we should at least know where it's at.
I agree with you. It's something that I can certainly really look at. I guess I haven't given it a whole lot of thought on it, but I can certainly, Bobby and I and Bill can talk about it. I just think it's really difficult to do that, but not impossible.
Yeah, the village is limited
What
for
is
its general
playground
obligation
improvement?
borrowing.
Is that,
I was just gonna say, we're limited to, I think it's 5% of our equalized value or whatever. So the
Yeah.
village has a set limit. And then we have a policy that says we only want to borrow such a percentage of our allowed limit. And I think,
That was in the material that we approved, right? Like a couple months ago.
yes.
Yeah.
So I
But
think
to
we're
be
currently
honest,
around 50%.
I'm gonna be honest with you. We could never afford to get to those levels. Because rich communities, the 5% is such a huge amount that we couldn't afford the payments on that unless we really want. That is really tied more to your poorer communities that don't have as much equalized value. You need to limit it or they overborrow and they borrow more than what their community's worth, basically. So I don't pay much attention. We have it in the policy. I'm fine with it, but we will never ever get to that level in Cross Plains because our debt service would be so huge.
Does our debt service include the water and sewer then?
No, well, individually it does, obviously, but those are enterprise agencies, so that doesn't fall. Your debt service that you pay on your tax levy doesn't cover the debt service and water and sewer. Those are done by the rates. Well, we're getting running a little bit out of time. Why don't we do this with if everybody at next month can pick out on just the 2023 what you think we should look into. Let's narrow this list down a little bit. And then next meeting, we'll pick that out and then maybe divide it out. Because I do want to talk a little bit about the last two items on the agenda. So can people just look at the 2023, the very first item, you can totally ignore it because we're actually looking at a much cheaper way of doing it. And that is, I don't see that happening for another 2-3 minimum 2-3-4 years at best. So
You're saying the West Side Stormwater drainage
yeah,
system?
we're looking today. We're looking at a proposal that does not use the 42-inch pipe. It uses open drainage ditches that could happen if certain things happen. So that's what we were talking about. So this one I don't think is on the table anymore.
That's cool.
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for, right? So if we could do that, that would be great. Just go through that list, pick the ones you think that we could be beneficial in looking over. And if you have questions, you can just shoot them to me and I can answer some of these on there on the stuff, or you can just talk. It's pretty clear what department sent it in. You could certainly shoot those department heads a question on it. All right, if everybody's good with that, I want to go to community survey. I'm really thinking it's been a while since we had one. I'm really thinking it would be good. And it comes up in these discussions all the time. Get a feel from the community on what they feel is important, how much they would pay for services, that type of thing, grade services. I think it's time to probably do that again. We could probably try digging out one of the older ones, and that way we can pick out some of the same questions, so we have kind of a base and see if things have gone up or down. What are people's thoughts on a community survey?
I think the village is growing enough that it's not a bad idea. Different people have moved in and different thoughts, and
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, I'll take kind of at least a lead on this and try to do some research on what we've done in the past and maybe what other communities have done, and then I can bring that back and we can start having a little bit of discussion on that.
Yeah.
Does that sound good to everybody? All right. So then the last one, this has been on a couple times, and Bobby brought it up at the staff meeting, and our engineer, believe it or not, he has a whole database on what other communities are doing in this area, and he's gonna email all that information to Bobby. So we have a lot of information coming. Jerry wanted to give us how it's been handled currently. So I think it'd be good for us to get something together on this. I think it's time to have this discussion, since we have all these new developments going in with sidewalks in, I don't know, 10, 15 years. They're probably going to need to be replaced, and currently we don't have a policy on what happens, so the village pays for it all. So do I have one or two people that want to work on this sidewalk assessment report, just to kind of put all the information together in a report so we have something to look
Jay, I
at?
started to look at that a while back
Oh.
just for something to do. And most of them have, they're referring me to their ordinances online that says, they have to replace the sidewalk. There's a fee that they're assessed. You can replace it yourself, but it has to be the standards of the community, what they set up, it has to be 4 inches thick, not an inch thick, all those things that they allow you to replace your own, but it has to meet the community standard. But I'm hoping maybe it's good to hear the engineering company has all that information. So it's going to be a lot simpler.
Okay.
Than we
Are
think.
you volunteering, bud? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I would-
when
yeah.
when you get that information, can you shoot it over to Tim? And Tim, will you contact Jerry then to get the information on our current way
Sure.
of operating?
Yep.
And yeah, I don't think this will be a real long report.
Right.
But I think it's something I'd like to have this discussion now before it becomes a big issue.
Okay.
All right. So future agenda items. Anybody? It seems like we all pretty much have some assignments. Anything else on the future that you'd like to see on the agenda in the future? All right. Well, we'll get caught up, and then we'll see if there's other things that members give us and stuff. All right. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Move.
Do I have a second? All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed, the same. Thank you very much. Good work coming out of this committee. Really good work. Appreciate it. All right, you
Thank
guys have a
you.
good one.
Thanks, guys.